This is Kamara with the Black Dove Oracle. I am the Black Dove Oracle. Sometimes I'm saying with the Black Dove Oracle. Sometimes I feel as if this is a podcast and then it's a tarot channel. Maybe it's both. It probably is both. So, welcome. If you are a subscriber, thank you so much for your continued support. It feels so good to read your comments. I really do appreciate when you all do that uplifting because not that I need it, but I'm like, thank you so much. It really does help me to continue to utilize my energy to do more of these channeled messages as well as the tarot readings. So thank you. If you're brand new here, my name is Kamara. I'm a psychic medium. I channel my ancestors. I channel the divine ancient Sibyls and spirit itself. Know that these channeled messages are received and transmitted with care. So, wow. The spirit was like, Spirit was showing me a mask this morning. I was just kind of like milling around, and the phrase, the mask they wear, came up. And I just wrote it down in my notes. I was like, the mask they wear, the mask you wear. And then when I sat down, I was like, oh, I wonder what channeled message I'm going to work on, because I just have a list. Sometimes I get little kind of like transmissions, and I just put them in my phone on a list. And I was looking through my phone and I said, oh, the master of disguise. And I said, well, I wonder if that's you watching, collective, or is there someone who's a master of disguise in your environment? But then spirit was like, no, it's about your villain error. So I am fascinated by the villain error. Even in my psychotherapy practice, I enter that thought. Sometimes I ask my clients as they're healing and changing their lives, I go, it kind of feels like you're entering into your villain error. And, it depends on how they've been exposed to some of the Gen Z talk. And if they haven't, I explain it. So, yeah, I need to probably start explaining some of this because like I hang out on TikTok and I know some things from hanging out on TikTok. Well, your villain error, especially if you like superheroes, I grew up reading comic books. Your villain error is about reclaiming your power and stepping out of the shadows of codependency, maybe toxic relationships. And it's not necessarily becoming malicious or harmful. It's more about embracing the courage to live authentically, even if it means challenging the status quo or even challenging those expectations that others have placed on you. Because it's often in this phase that we have to disappoint people to live in our truth, right? So in this phase, you might be called the villain because the people who once benefited from your compliance, who benefited from you kind of acquiescing your power to them, you're going to become a villain to them by refusing to play in those roles in their lives anymore in order to serve your highest self. So the master of disguise is about navigating a life with wisdom, because you're going to have to still move through life, right? And sometimes that transformation is not really, quote unquote, authorized by society. Society may have you in roles because of your gender. It might have you in roles because of your sexuality. It may have you in roles because of um, maybe your marital status or non-marital status. You know what I mean? Like it may have you in roles because of the kind of money you make or what side of town you lived on. So, I mean, all of these roles, they are there if we want to accept them. But as you all know, I'm a big believer in our destiny. And we do not have to live a fated life if we don't want one. We can live and create our own destiny. So when you're in this kind of energy, you are a villain. You will have adversaries chasing after you, maybe for a lifetime, because you chose yourself. I was thinking back to some of the comic book superheroes that went through a villain era, and I think the most popular one is Batman, right? Like when Batman: The Dark Knight Returns came out, everybody was like, "What? Oh, like could Batman actually have a dark side?" And I think what I remember was that he just became fed up with like trying to do things the way, he thought was morally how he had to do it. And he just was like, no, I'm just gonna like unalive MFs, if I got to. I don't even know how dark he went. I don't remember. And you all can let me know in the comments. And then remember, and then there's some superheroes that just they were taken over by different kinds of energies, right? Like if you remember the X-Men, Jean Grey, um, in her Dark Phoenix saga, she like just became a destructive force. And I mean, she had to take her own self out just to prevent further destruction. And then there was Superman, right? And the symbiote. I think that's how you pronounce it. Storyline where he adopted a darker persona because he was under the influence of an alien. So, I mean, all that to say, the superhero hero villain errors, they're a little bit more, how do you want to say, shadowy. While yours may be just about living in your truth. But I think oftentimes we will be perceived in this area, in this error, right? And so this is about you kind of in this period. I think Spirit is telling me right now that your villain error is about you developing a thicker skin for being perceived, in service of living in your truth and living in your authenticity. So your villain error is like, how are you, for some people, this happens like in their families because their families have grown so accustomed to them kind of being there to be a servant in the family. And maybe you're like, that no longer works for me. I have my own life, regardless if you were somebody's mother, father, sister, brother, cousin. You know, these errors could, if you allow it, put you into some chaos, could throw you back into some chaos if you don't stand firm in this error. If you don't really develop some kind of like strong intention and work with your spirit guides or your ancestors or spirit itself, like you're going to have to like really build up your spiritual army, I'm hearing from, to be able to live in this villain era until people just decide they're not going to fight you anymore, that they're going to accept who you are at this point in your life. But you've got to know, for some people, they're extracting themselves from very toxic family and maybe cultural community situations where them leaving may require just a brand new life. I mean, low key, a part of the work that I do, that I specialize in, is helping people who have left cults. And the one thing about the cult, some very popular ones, is that, once you decide to leave, everybody who's in the cult, including your family, can never communicate with you again. Including if you had any children, even. So, I mean, it can get really deep, this villain error, because there's a lot of loss, right? A lot of like grief there. So, if you're at this reading, I kind of feel like you were called to it. Much like my other channeled messages, you're called to it because the title, it's not always going to tell you what this is about, but this was your villain error and you've got to understand it, and Spirit wants to communicate some stuff to you. So let me tell you briefly what we are going to uncover or seek to uncover. So we're going to look at you then, meaning you before becoming a villain, and then you now. And then we are going to ask Spirit the question about what was the catalyst for all of this. And then we are going to first ask what aspects of your authentic self have been suppressed to maintain harmony in your toxic relationships. And how can embracing these parts help you reclaim your power? And then one other question is, how do you balance the need for self preservation with the desire to maintain connections? I mean, especially when these connections have become toxic and draining. Like, how do you do that? And then lastly, we're just going to look at the fears and societal judgments that arise when you think of being seen as a villain. Like, how do you care for yourself? And how do you even reframe the narrative to honor your growth? Yeah. So this can get pretty deep, y'all. So, and it may be long. I feel like I'm doing a long intro right now, but we are going to get started with group number 1. There's going to be 4 groups. And these avatars, you can interchange them for whatever group. They're just here for your visual pleasure. And what else? Take care of yourself when you hear this. And if you resonate with any of the channeled messages, can you please give me a thumbs up before you leave? And if you like the way that I channel messages, can you please consider subscribing to this brand new channel? It really helps me to get these channeled messages out to the collective, a larger collective. And I really do appreciate you, especially if you're brand new here. Thanks so much. So let's go to group number 1. Group number 1. This is Kamara with the Black Dove Oracle, and welcome to your villain error. And Spirit said you were a master of disguise, group number 1. So the first thing we are going to do is kind of like a you then and you now kind of pull, just so that you'll have a little bit of an energy check, vibe check, to see if really this is your group. Wow. So group number 1, I would say prior to you becoming a villain, you were someone who had, how do I want to say this? You were kind of obsessive in nature. Like, once you kind of had a thought and it kind of put its hooks into you, it became somewhat of like a religion, and this could be, and this is what I'm hearing from spirit. It's kind of like if you liked someone or you had a crush on them, like everything about them, including them, became your life. You were obsessed with thinking about them. What are they doing? I wonder if they're thinking about me. Let me listen to this tarot message. um, and you kind of did that with a lot of things in your life. It didn't only have to be lovers. I think with friends, you often gave up your own identity and kind of morphed into theirs. What are their interests? What do they want to do? And so if a friend was even into a certain kind of food, like maybe you weren't vegetarian and all of a sudden you meet someone who's a vegetarian, like, oh, I should change the way that I eat. Like, but it wasn't done like in a way that you were interested in these things. It was more like you were at a high level of people pleasing, maybe back in the past. And you came at that with such passion that people would actually believe this is something you wanted to do. So, in many ways, group number one, a lot of your life in the past really wasn't revolving or centering you and your desires, your needs. It often came with some kind of ulterior motive, a hidden agenda. Even personally or professionally, you felt like even if you went to work somewhere, if everybody at that job was kind of wearing the same kind of clothes, you would go out and buy those kind of clothes. You would decide to take on the priorities that that job had. Like if everybody worked on the weekends and late nights, you were there working late nights and the weekends. Like there was something here about you really, spirit is showing me for some people this was a, a few years of operating like this. And yeah, spirit is saying for me to just get one more card for information. Yeah, there was a lot of dependence on people, a lot of need for outside validation, a lot of need for you to be liked. As spirit is saying, low key, to be loved. And maybe this came from a really toxic attachment with a parent figure or both parents. Maybe in your household, love was conditional. Go clean up your room and then you can get a hug. Go clean up your room and then you can watch TV with me. There was something conditional. Even as a young child, you kind of learned that was the language. If you do what I want first, then you will get yours, whatever you need from that, right? So, Spirit is saying that it was not surprising that as you grew up into an adult, that those same traits would prevail. So, in your villain error, wow, group number one, you became a warrior. You developed your strengths, your skills, your discipline, your toughness of will. You also learned how to self-sacrifice your ego, which is kind of interesting because you would think self-sacrificing would be the old you. But for you, you understood that the reason why you were serving other people's needs prior your villain era was because you wanted to be liked. You wanted to be loved. Your ego would be pleased that way. But when you're in your villain era, you understand that ego has to be put in its place, because you wanted to live, and you are living now, I suspect, group number one, from a place of true authenticity. Like if you want to do something, you're going to do it. If you don't want to do something, you're not going to do it. And this is, as you can imagine, group number one, a very distinctive change for people who have been around you prior to this villain error. I mean, you have people who are saying that you're causing them to suffer, that you are harmful now because you refuse to cooperate with their lack of boundaries. In fact, Spirit is saying that's the one thing you had to learn. Some of you went to therapy to learn that. Others of you might have you might have read a book. Others of you, Spirit is saying, really had to turn to Spirit itself. Maybe you started to really develop some kind of spiritual practice that helped you to recognize what discipline was. For some people, I can see like more structured versions of meditation, like Vipassana or Zen. Like for some of you, you had to learn, maybe for some of you, I'm seeing someone may have learned martial arts, a particular kind of martial arts, like, is that Taoism? Or Taoism is probably a practice, but isn't there like a martial arts that kind of centers that? Oh, Aikido. Is that Aikido? Y'all let me know in the comments. But someone even you had to begin to adopt a practice, group number one, that was going to help you to recognize that there are external forces and internal forces. And it was going to teach you how to determine which one you were operating in. So, group number one, your villain error is quite that of someone who has had to come to terms with power and responsibility. Because, when we're exercising power, whatever it is, some of us have power over a lover. Some of us have power within the workplace. Some of us have power simply because of our positionality in an organization, or within the family. We might be the eldest. I mean, power, we all have somewhere, even if it's just power over in our environment, to walk on the ground and and do things to the insects that are around. We're bigger than them. So there's this sense of you now in your villain error, which is really just you, group number one, that you kind of emerge from the shadows of having to be behind people. And your true self being behind a closed door. Now the door is open, I'm seeing. And Spirit is saying that in your villain error, it's actually giving you the confidence. It's giving you the it's given you the willingness to even go after those things that you want and desire, group number one. Some of you have started to ask people out on dates, okay? Some of you are really going after things that you want that way. Others of you are beginning to like nurture yourself. Like you realize, okay, if the things that the prior me needed and didn't get growing up, I'm going to give them to myself now. I'm going to give it to myself now. And so there's something here, group number one, about you developing more patience with yourself, more unconditional love, more nurturance. And there's something here about just having a joy for life again. I mean, when literally, group number one, when people from your past see you now, you look illuminated. You may even look younger. Some people might even tell you that you look younger. if if you're more mature. But all this to say, group number one, was that in your villain era, you've quite literally taken on a new identity. And it's important now to to kind of find out what was the catalyst here. Like, what sparked this change? What made it happen? Wow. Well, this does work. Group number one, you had to move. You had to leave your environments. For some of you, this was quite literal. Like, you had to move out of your city, state, some of you, your country. For others of you, you had to move in more communal ways. Like, you had to move out of a community or a group of people. You had to move out of a family structure. You made movements. You set out on a journey. Because when I look at this card, moving forward, the first step is taken within our stillness. I think you first had to build up what we call a foundation. You had to build that up, a structure that was going to support you, because you may be on your own. You knew this, group number one, about your villain error, that when you decided to step fully into your authenticity, you may be alone. So you had to build up the scaffolding. That's what we call it. Like when a building's getting ready to get painted, and, someone's not going to get up there on a ladder, like if the building's really tall, you've got to build scaffolds so that the people painting the building have more security. They have more stability as they're painting the outside of the structure. And that is your life, group number one. Like, you had to set it up. You had to say, listen, if I'm going to move, where can I go where I would feel welcomed? For some of you, you said, if I'm going to move, then what's the most peaceful environment that I can go towards? If I'm going to move, where could I go where the things I like to do are readily available to me? Like, say, I'm seeing someone who likes to surf. And you're like, I'm just going to move by the ocean. At least I know that if I surf every day, I'm not going to feel lonely. I'm not going to be tempted to go back into toxic relationships. It was something like that, right? And so for you, group number one, it was about removing yourself literally from environments that were toxic and harmful. You really had no choice. For some of you, because of the temptation of the toxic environments you were in, removal of yourself was the only way to go. Especially if you were dealing with some kind of sober issues too, like you just needed to get the hell away from people who were either drinking or doing substance. You're like, I can't be in this and try to heal. So, I mean, for some of you, it was just a real practical thing to do. For others of you, it was about building up yourself psychologically. Like, I just need to be away from this. And get myself into some therapy, get myself into a different environment, and just begin to build and build and build my strength. So, wow, group number one, you did some deep ass work here. And no one is blaming you. I mean, there might be people from your past that are shocked. We could see. But let's go to what aspects of your authentic self had to be suppressed to maintain the harmony. Because we know that in order for you to even begin to extract yourself from toxic environments, you had to know that you were actually in one. So, what were you doing in the past to help yourself survive? I think we kind of talked about it. Like, you just kind of did what everyone else was doing. You left behind your identity and adopted another. Yeah. Wow, this is deep, because Spirit is saying for some of you, when you did that, it was easier for you to achieve. you actually achieved in your past life. Like for some of you, you may have become a leader in some kind of organization that was hell of toxic because you gave up who you were. It was so easy for you to fall in line and be able to tout the toxic, what do you want to call this? Theories or ways of life of these organizations, people you live with, community. You may have held some kind of high position, spirit is saying, in a real toxic organization. Hmm. Like you might have been VP or CEO or COO. I don't know. Like you were held a high position, some of you. That's interesting. What else did you do to when you suppressed your authentic self in the past environment? Mm, well, I'm going to say this, group number one. You and this might be something that you're still having to deal with. You participated in a lot of betrayal, including betrayal against yourself, I'm hearing. But betrayal was a big part of being in whatever environment you were in. And you didn't get away with it. I mean, it caused you a lot of mental distress. Yeah, it literally took the things like your success in that environment. It literally took that success and just drained it of its life force. Like if you were the president of an organization or a CEO of some company, you literally just felt like you were living in a shadowy desert. Like there was nothing nourishing about these positions, no matter how many new cars you brought or the latest outfit you had or the Rolex you had. Like there was nothing that could satiate that kind of emptiness. Wow. Yeah. Nine of Wands even. Like you had to really sit and stop for a moment and be like, why is this life, the one that everybody seems to feel and the one that I pretend is so great, that's so successful, has left me quite unhappy, left me feeling empty inside. So how did you balance that need for self-preservation? Especially with connections that were highly toxic. How did you balance the need for self-preservation and a desire to maintain connections? Because I think here's what it is, group number one. You were starting to understand this life sucks. You were starting to understand that, but you still had quote unquote friendships. You maybe even had a lover or a spouse that was deep in this life that you're wanting to leave. How were you able to maintain? You weren't. You weren't. You started losing friends. And the thing is that I think at some point, group number one, you knew these people weren't your friends. So it was just a matter of having to let, first of all, friends go, people who weren't in alignment with you, community. And then you had to sit down with yourself and figure out, okay, what would make me happy? What would give me a cup? What would be that place where I would be in a beautiful Nine of Cup energy, where I'm receiving all the love, the care, the respect, the boundaries that I need? So I think that's how you started to kind of shift things. So, what fears or societal judgments arise when you think of being seen as a villain for prioritizing yourself? Well, I'm sure you could tell us, group number one. But Let's see what Spirit says about the fears, like what you should do about those fears. Because maybe some of you still have them. Maybe you've done a good part of the work, but there is still this fear that comes up around being perceived as this villain. And if you still have it, it's about just developing the knowledge of what you were doing in the past. Some of you need that psychological knowledge. Like, you need to know about attachment styles. You need to know about boundaries because that is helping you. That is helping you stay grounded because you understand that this isn't just a way of life. Like, this is toxic. And why is it toxic? Why do people gravitate towards this? And you needed that reinforcement. So for some of you, you found a really good therapist. I really do think some of you found a really good therapist that was going to help you kind of, you know, move out of some stuck behavior patterns. For others of you, you've found a really incredible lover, someone who sees you, someone who they're just really on your level, you know? They're kind. They have beliefs just like you do. So spiritually, you both align. And you both are elevated right now. That's kind of interesting. Like, Spirit is saying that you both are really, you have some kind of leadership positions, both of you. And so with that, again, Spirit is saying it comes with responsibility. And you like the way this person handles responsibility. You like that even if you all have a disagreement, this person's not trying to put the responsibility on you. They're quite literally go within and say, well, let me just think about this because, this is a person you respect so much, group number one. And if you haven't met this person, Spirit says this person's coming in. As you do this work, this person you all will meet because there's something here about you both being magnetized towards each other. When you meet this person too, it's not going to be if you've met this person or when you get ready to meet this person, because Spirit says it's the same thing, this person is not going to be confused about you. They're not going to be like, I don't know why I'm attracted to group number one. I don't know what I want with group number. It's not like that. This person's very clear when they meet you. They're like, oh, group number one, that's my partner. That's my love. Wow. I think what's also been very successful for you, group number one, is your ability to just spend some time on your own to really reflect. I think even if you're in a partnership, you may take some vacations by yourself. You may go within, whether that's in a practice or just going into nature. The water means a lot to you. Like, I think you find a lot of inner peace when you go to the ocean or you go to some body of water. You find a lot of peace there, a lot of reflection. So, you are a water baby, whether you are a water sign or not. Hmm. You also don't mind living in your passion. Bottom of the deck. Yeah. You have, in many ways, this authentic living that you're in, it has reignited your sensuality. Maybe for some of you, because of living in the past, your libido was not there. But now living in your truth, your libido is like off the chains. Like, if you're in a partnership right now, your partner's like, wow, we're very active. And if you are not with a partner right now, that is going to be like an aspect of your future relationships that you are going to love. Like, you are giving yourself even permission to express yourself sensually. And that might have been something in the past that you didn't do, especially if you were in environments that were highly religious. Now you're giving yourself permission to express that way, group number one. Wow. Yeah. And there's something here now where you you lean into logic now. You're not just letting, especially if some of you, spirit's also saying some of you were in spiritual bypassy kind of communities. You're not doing that anymore. Like if you feel something and you feel like you need to communicate it, you're not going to let somebody kind of gaslight you. Group number one. Yeah. And you think long and hard before you make changes now. You're like, is this a change I want to make? Or is this a change that someone else wants me to make? You do a lot of self inquiry now, group number one, because it's so important for you to understand where you are versus what other people want. So that's what I have for you, group number one. It sounds like you have made some very distinctive changes, and that has put you in your villain error. It really has. I think people from the past, spirit is showing me they don't know you anymore. And you may hear this from people. I don't know them anymore. Like they totally changed. And in a sense, you may not they may not know you because they have no contact with you either. Like they just literally do not know you. And for you, you're fine with this because this new life that you have, it requires for you to be your highest authentic self. Like you've set it up purposely that way, group number one, so that it feels like a little tension. It feels even maybe a little painful to not be in your authenticity. You've set it up. You're like, no. And I even have little, indicators of when I'm leaning towards something that's not me. That's great work, group number one. That's awesome work. So if you resonate with any or part of this channeled message, group number one, could you give me a thumbs up? And if you like the way that I channel messages and want to stay connected, this is your official invitation to subscribe to my channel. Click the bell because you'll get notified when I upload new channel messages. If this is where we part, group number one, wow, thank you. Thank you for modeling all of that. I really, truly appreciate the work that you have done. Okay, my honeys. Hello, group number two. How are you? This is Kamara with the Black Dove Oracle, and welcome to your villain era, a master of disguise. So, group number two, if you just kind of clicked on here from the timestamps below, this particular channeled message is about your journey to live in your authentic self, even if that meant disappointing others around you and becoming the villain. Okay? So, first, what we're going to do, group number two, is we're going to talk about you then, you in the past, and you now in your villain era, just to kind of do an energy check so that you can see if this is going to be your group. So, let's go to you in the past. Who were you in the past? Wow. Well, group number two, in the past, you pursued and maybe was a little bit consumed with pursuing pleasure, maybe even at the detriment of your health. I mean, you were an indulger. You liked to indulge in pleasure. And for many of us, that's not a bad thing. But it's important to understand that you may have done this as a way of Escaping your responsibilities, escaping accountability in some ways. These are kind of harder things to look at our past prior to our villain error. But, Spirit is showing that you may have not had a lot of boundaries around relationships. And, outside of someone proclaiming that they are in polyamory relationships, outside of that, you would have been someone who didn't maintain boundaries with partners that your friends were involved with. You may have, um, just going by somebody else's definition, you may have cheated on your partners. You may have found yourself the kind of person that, while you didn't really intentionally do those things, you may have gone to parties and maybe you drunk too much, or there was something here around you not always having a lot of control over your actions. And that you liked, for others of you, it was about liking the good life. Like you didn't really care for the heavier things in life. You wanted to look good and feel good. You may spend a lot of your money on looking good. You may have had a problem financially in the past, group number 2, because you liked to indulge. Like sometimes instead of paying your rent, you would go and buy something that would put you in some kind of like weaker position when it came to having to take care of financial responsibilities, which may have led to drama with roommates, dramas with partners. So there was a group number 2. Spirit is showing me that you had a quite dramatic past life, one with a lot of fighting, one with a lot of um, how do I want to say this? Chaos. And also you may have thought in your past life that you were quite a spiritual person, that people just didn't understand you, um, that people needed to learn how to be with people who wanted to live their life differently. You may have used a lot of escapism to justify why you didn't show up to work that day, or you may have had a false sense of heroism too. Like you felt like the things you had to do, you didn't show up to work because your friend needed you. You didn't show up to work because, your dog escaped and you had to go and find your dog. Like for you, these seem like legitimate reasons, but you always presented them as larger than life reasons why you couldn't be responsible. Wow. And for you, I think you did use your spirituality or some sense of like self awareness to explain your cruelty sometimes to people, and I think this was like really hard, group number 2, for you to look at yourself in the past. It might even be hard to listen to these things now because you're like, gosh, yeah, that was not the best me. That was not the best version of me. So, what is the version of you now? Well, it's kind of interesting now, group 2, in your villain error. You know how to surrender to the divine. And you know that you can do that with complete trust. Your faith levels are off the chart because you're no longer using spirit as an excuse. Instead, you are serving spirit. It's a completely different you. I'm hearing from spirit, though, some people find it hard to accept this version of you. Yeah, in your villain error, group number 2, you now have a healthy relationship. You have many healthy relationships now because you've learned what it takes to be loyal. You've learned, how to be with the tension of having the discipline around your relationships. That's what I'm hearing. And you also had to learn to decenter yourself in relationships, group number 2. You did. Now, many of the people who know you now, who consider you a great lover or companion or friend or colleague, they really sense you as someone who's selfless. Like you're willing to do whatever it takes to get things done. If a friend of yours is in need, you're dropping everything to go and help them and assist them. Your partner feels like you pay attention to them in a way that's just really healthy and kind. Like you bring them flowers, you kiss them, you tell them you love the way they smell. Like there's something about the attention that you're able to give now, because in your villain era, this era you're currently in, you're able to really step away from centering yourself. I keep hearing that, and you can center others now. Spirit is saying there are people who don't believe this new you, group number 2. And in that sense, you have become their villain, because they're like, I don't care what you say about group number 2. I just know group number 2 from the past did A, B, and C, and I can never believe that they changed. But for you, group number 2, I think you've had to understand that, yes, in the past you had a lot of unhealthy relationships and you were a big part of those things. And now you understand why. Even you understand why people from the past, people you may have hurt, people you may have harmed, you understand why they would consider you the villain. And in some ways, I think that makes you a little sad from time to time. I think you've tried to go and apologize or take accountability. But I think in all of those processes, some people may have accepted your apologies, but I think there's some key relationships that really haven't. I'm seeing for someone an ex-partner that just really will never accept that you have changed. I also see like it could be a friend, maybe even a family member. So take it where it resonates. But, let's ask about what was the catalyst, group number 2, for this change? Because in one way, Spirit is showing someone who was kind of all over the place, kind of like just chaotic. And then now the contrast is so stark because you're very grounded, you're very focused. Wow. This is deep. Group number 2. The card says forgiveness. Wow. It says hurt blocks are light. So this was the catalyst, group number 2. Like you quite literally, Spirit is saying that while you sought out forgiveness from other people, that wasn't the catalyst. The catalyst was you forgiving yourself first. Because I think time after time, you seeing that you were disappointing people or harming people, it really started to impact your own sense of self. And the catalyst was, wow, I can't keep thinking I'm trash. Because the more I think that I'm trash, the more I'm going to do trashy things. And so there was somewhere in there, Spirit is showing you had a coming to Jesus moment where you were just like, I've got to forgive myself for this. Like, one, I don't want to keep doing this. And two, I've got to just get over the shame somehow. And I don't know if it was just simple like that, group number two. I think you actually had to do some real intensive work on yourself. You had to learn what healthy relationships were all about. You may have had to go and really, I don't know, I keep saying therapy, but hey, I'm a therapist and a lot of people go to therapy. You may have had to go and do some inner work because somewhere in that you may have found that you had to forgive one of your parents or both of your parents or a caregiver. Like there's something in there where forgiveness played a large part in you turning around. Wow. Hmm. So what aspects of your authentic self were you suppressing in the past in order to maintain harmony in your relationships? Like what were you suppressing back then? I mean, we covered a lot of it, but what did you have to do to maintain the toxicity? What were you doing to maintain that toxicity? Mhm. Yeah, you had to focus on like the real like superficial. You had to give a lot of allegiance to the superficial. It was always about how you look, how others look, what others are wearing, how what you are wearing, the latest brands, the latest makeup trends. You also had to be in hot pursuit of King of Wands types. You were after that D for some of you, pardon the, expression. Or some of you, if you're in the masculine or, you were after that P, but you were after it. You made that kind of your hobby. That was the way that you were going to prove that you were desirable. You were going to prove in some cases you were lovable, but I don't know how much love ever really entered into those things in the past. It was more about self-validation. You often had to act impulsively or felt like acting impulsively. And then in the end, you would realize how harmful that had been to someone. I think in the end, there was a lot of yourself that kind of became like a stone. You weren't doing this with passion. You were doing it because you felt cold. You felt removed, group number two. And so, in many ways, it was easy for you to fit around people who also felt that way, disconnected from their feelings, disconnected from their emotions and the emotions of others. Wow. So, how, when you were going and thinking about this change, group number two, how did you understand the balance and the need for self preservation while wanting to maintain connections that were still toxic? How did you balance that need? I think for you, group number two, you had to understand that you weren't free in this expression. Even though, you could have said it over and over again, I don't need monogamy. I don't need all these relationships. I just need to satisfy my needs and move on. That might have been something in some form or fashion that you said. And I think that you realized you were still under control, under the control of these relationships, of that lifestyle. And for you, the only way for you to be free was to change, to transform. That was the only way that you were going to be able to be who you were. You had to literally leave an old relationship. For some of you, this was a long time relationship, like an intimate relationship. For others of you, it was a best friend, partner in crime. Yeah, for some of you might have used that to describe each other, partner in crime. You had to leave this long-term relationship, someone you might have grown up with or went to high school with or grown up with. This was a long-time relationship that was just toxic as AF. And group number 2, you had to leave it. You were like, "Okay, listen. If I want to live in my authenticity, if I really want to change, I can't have this person around. They're they're not gonna respect me wanting a new life for myself." And for some of you, there was a deep grieving period, like, you really had to grieve this. There was just no coming out of it. You had to grieve it. Um, yeah. What fears and societal judgments arise when you think about being seen as a villain now? Because especially to this person that you had to leave behind, you are a villain. This person goes around telling many narratives about you in your past, things that they hope will get to your current friends and your current partner. But I think you've been really upfront with your current friends and your current partner, especially your current partner. I'm hearing like you, group number 2, you decided to out yourself. You were like, listen, I have a past that I'm not very proud of. And I think that was one of the things you were able to do. But what else, Spirit? Because Spirit just showed me that like you decided to tell people the truth yourself. But this person from the past, whoever this was, they are hell bent on getting revenge or they're very resentful. I think you also had to let go of a lot of material stuff. You had to put your material life back in order again, group number 2. Maybe some of you had like credit issues because of buying things randomly, or maybe you had to like downsize stuff. You might have had to like get rid of a lot of stuff, like sell off all your Gucci. I'm just saying as an example, but like you had to sell off stuff. You really, I mean, literally, group number 2. I think when people now who know you and you talk about this past life of yours, they really find it hard to imagine you lived this way. They're like, "For real, you live this way?" And you're like, "Yes, I did. I was on yachts, I was video girl, I was doing all kinds of stuff." And I think these people are like, "For real?" Like, they would need proof. They would have to see it to believe it. But for you, being the villain now, group number 2, you realize that being the villain now means you get to be free. You get to be in community and with people who matter, who think you matter. And you get to be in environments where these surface things, they don't matter. It's about who you are on the inside. And you feel healthier in these environments. You feel more accepted. You have learned how to accept people to by who they are for real, not what they're showing you, in terms of the surfacey stuff. So, in many ways, I think sometimes being in the villain era, group number 2, you may still, on occasion, wonder if you've truly changed enough. And Spirit is saying, you have. You have. You're not impulsive anymore. You take your time. That's a really big change you made. You really think about things before you say something and before you do something. You also may, for some of you, and this is very specific, you may have had a child or a couple of them. Might be some twins, fraternal. That's very specific. But you may have had some kids. I know parenting can sometimes turn your life around too because you don't want to carry on toxic traits anymore. That was specific, but for someone, yeah, you have some kids. Your kids might even be Cancer. They might have had a birthday recently. Hmm. Really cute. They play, they love being in nature, and I think you see that that part of life is way more valuable than anything you can buy in a store, at a boutique. Yeah. And you have a really good partnership, whoever this is. You have a lot of fun with this partner, and you all really have a passionate life. It's not like you had to give up your sensuality or things like that. It was more about just like being able to find that joy in a different way. I'm hearing from spirit. You all might have a cat too. Some kind of orange cat. I don't know, that's getting very specific. But yeah, that's what I'm getting, group number 2. Wow. Very powerful, this change. So group number 2, if you resonated with any or part of this channeled message, could you give me a thumbs up? It's just a way to help me grow this brand new channel so that maybe other people can listen to these channeled messages and receive maybe some assistance from them. If you like the way that I channel messages and would like to stay connected, this is your official invitation to subscribe to this channel. And if you click the bell, you'll get notified when I upload new channeled messages. If this is where we part, group number 2, I do understand this kind of change. And it's really inspiring to get to read and channel through this life experience that you've shared with us. So thank you. All right, my honeys. Hello, group number 3. This is Kamara with the Black Dove Oracle. And this is your channeled message, your villain error, a master of disguise. Group number 3, groups 1 and 2. Wow. So, group number 3, we are going to start with a you versus then, so you can get the energy check and see if this truly is your group. And from there, we're going to look at the catalysts of change for you. And then we're going to ask a few like really important questions about this journey of you accepting your authentic self and living in your authenticity. So let's look at the you versus now. Group number 3. How were you back in the past before this villain error? Interesting. Very similar start to group number 2. Places material considerations and security above empowerment. You may have felt like it was necessary, group number 3, to manipulate maybe life and people to get your needs met. I think for some of you, this is not a judgment. I'm just saying in the past, you might have even dabbled in sex work, X work. And no judgment if that's something you're still doing. But yeah, in the past, you might have did some X work to get additional money or to pay for the things that you needed to pay for. For some of you, a lot of your life had to be like you felt like you were in environments where you always had to manipulate getting your needs met. I hear even with family. I think you were the kind of person, group number 3, that often used humor to try to disguise or deny what you were feeling, maybe even what others were feeling. So, in a way, not many people took you seriously. You didn't want people to take you seriously. Um, you really did not have a great relationship with money in the sense of like, it was always something you were struggling for, or something that you were considering the only way that you could achieve it was through luck. You might have overplayed lottery, or you may have always fell victim to kind of get rich quick schemes, you know? Um, for some of you, you might have thought about being an actor or an actress. Some of you might have thought about that. Um, for some of you, you relied a lot on escapism. You may have smoked a lot of, trees. You might have indulged a lot in substances in the past. Spirit says one more. Yeah, I think above all, though, you had to start to understand that the things that the power that you had, especially if you're a feminine, like there was something about you now switching over to your villain era. You decided to become the queen. There was something about you started to realize that your true power was in diving deeply into your divine feminine. Like you realized that that was where you felt your most powerful. That is where you felt like you had the right to exercise your own inner authority, group number 3. So in your villain era, you are a villain queen. You are someone who radiates from that energy. And now you have a thirst for wisdom and truth. Many of you have taken a great interest in learning about gods and goddesses and deities, and you now like to read books on ancient divine feminine. Someone Spirit's just showing me someone might play like a drum, like a hand drum. Like you're learning different arts and crafts of the divine feminine now, group number 3. For some of you, you really dived into your creative arts, regardless of gender. There's someone here too that really likes diving into the arts. You might paint now. You might do something around plants. Someone might have a plant business where you're kind of selling plants. That's very interesting. For others of you, you're really diving into just getting to know yourself and your creativity. You've really found refuge in your creativity, group number 3. Why are you a villain? What's the you now? I think you've done a lot of work on your wounded child. Some of you grew up in families that didn't have a lot of stability, especially financially. You may have even had a parent that did sex work. This is very specific. It's not, if it isn't you, don't worry. There's many people listening to this, but you may have had a parent who did this same kind of work, and maybe that was something of how you kind of got introduced to it. But then later on, because you just wanted to like embody your feminine in a different way, I think you had to kind of go over some of the wounding um, of of just like what took place when you were a child. Some of you did have traumatic childhoods. Now, I think you feel so good in your villain era. You feel very good about the money that you make and the successes that you have now, doing things, making money through your creativity. So there's something there, group number 3, of like how you were just as able, if not more, to make money through your creative pursuits. So this has been something that's proven to be a very villain thing to do. But let's see the catalyst. I'm not still getting like who, like if there's a strong energy that thinks of you as a villain, but we will see. What was the catalyst, group number 3, for you to move out of your past life into this life? Ooh. Yeah, I think it was you becoming much more connected to your emotions, helping yourself to understand your emotions, helping yourself to understand your needs. For many of you, your past life, group number 3, was because you felt like you had unmet needs and that no one was going to meet these needs except for you. And while that was true, I think what you find in your villain error or your error of authenticity is that, yeah, I get to meet my emotional needs and I have to learn how to do that. So you have been, for many of you, maybe you're a dancer now. Maybe in the past you were dancing, but it was more in the X industry. But now your dancing is kind of transformed. I'm seeing someone who wears kind of like these really cool like rainbow colors and golden colors and yeah, so you may be a dancer now in another sense, and that's really, you found like a real a way for you to healthily express your creativity. Not that you couldn't have done it otherwise, but it feels like you like this aspect. It feels like it gives you energy. Yeah, it says appropriate attention here. Like it's the kind of attention you get now. It feels better for you. It's more grounded for you when you think about it. Yeah. In many ways, too, Spirit is pointing out this has helped you connect with yourself spiritually, too. This movement, this dance that you do, it really truly has been the catalyst for you to live this new life of yours, group number 3. I think I get a sense of the villain error just being people from your past because maybe they're still doing the same things and you have decided to kind of evolve your world a little bit more, to dip into other things that you like. And I think there might be a few people who think, oh, she or he thinks, or they think they're too good for this life, And I don't think you ever give that vibe, but in a way, that might be the villain error that you're in, that you're kind of putting up boundaries around the past world because your new world feels better to you. Like you like this new world that you're in, that you've built for yourself. So, what aspects of your authentic self have you were suppressing to maintain harmony in toxic relationships? Um, what aspects of yourself were you suppressing in the past? It might have been your creativity, but let's see. Because there was something you had to do to kind of stay in that world, right? Yeah, you had to kind of dim your light, I'm hearing. For some of you, maybe you started to kind of introduce or wanted to introduce different dance techniques when you were doing performing in other spaces in the past. And it was just something that people weren't supporting. And you felt like you had to dim that part of you. And I think you just started to understand that that wasn't going to be the environment where you could really begin to express yourself creatively. that environment was kind of starting to lean towards it had one specific thing that it was offering to make money. And so I think you just decided to, yeah, you decided that you were going to expand on the things that brought you that could utilize you could utilize your intelligence with group number 3. So for many of you, you just got to work on what was your creativity, and it really brought you some notoriety. Maybe you even started to mix dance with eroticism, but not necessarily in the same venues you were in the past, and people were liking that. So it wasn't like you were giving up some of the sensuality, but you started to integrate it with your current world. For others of you, you just left that altogether, your past, and decided to start your own business, to start doing your own crafts. Um, I do feel like you may have even had to separate from someone who was from your past, group number 3, and that because they weren't really offering you a cup to the new you, you know? And I think people had grown accustomed to seeing you all together, but when this new life started to happen for you and you were getting more visibility and people wanting to work with you, I think this person just kind of, they faded into the background. It wasn't something that they can support at the moment, and I think you started to realize that, group number 3. So how did you balance the need for self-preservation? Because I think that's kind of getting into this question, like, how did you balance that with maintaining connections that have already turned toxic and draining? I think that was one of them. The other one was to just kind of go more into what it is that you could offer people. Like instead of, how am I want to say this, group number 3? I think instead of proclaiming that you were there regardless of thick and thin, I think you just had to understand that some relationships you had to let go because you have your own life and your own ambitions now, and they may not include or line with the same ambitions of people from the past. And I think you had to learn how to be okay with that. I think you had to be very generous with people. You had to understand this is the life they want to live, but I'm living my life now. And you all, it wasn't only about X work, but just whatever industry you were in. I think you had to. There was something about a past life self that just, and I say past life self, meaning an older version of yourself that just had to release some of the people from that life because really you're seeing the benefit, you're receiving the benefits of a more healthier version of yourself. So, lastly, what fears or societal judgments arise when you think of being seen as the villain? I think for some of you, I think you recognize, group number 3, that you already were kind of in the margins. If you were into X work, you were already in the margins. So there was something about the past version of yourself that was a little controversial, maybe, and so being the villain now, group number 3, you're like, I'm okay with it from a large group perspective. But I do think that you were really sad to lose this partnership. You thought that partnership would survive through a lot of your changes and growth. And so, in that respect, that was kind of hard for you because I think that was the one person. Maybe in the beginning, they seemed very supportive of you kind of moving out of that life. But I think when you start to rediscover your own talents creatively, that might have been intimidating to that person. I think you still wonder if you and that person would ever get back together again. But I think Spirit is also telling you, group number 3, that there's a lot of winds of change happening with that person and between you both. And some of those changes I don't think will help your relationship survive. Yeah. I think you are moving very quickly towards success in your life, group number 3, in your new life. And your villain error may be that you're not the same person this person decided that they loved and wanted to support. You're not that same person anymore. And you're now the villain. And so for you, group number 3, it brings with it some sadness, but also I think you understand that in order for you all to have a relationship that works, you have to pour into each other. And you're not feeling like that's an option right now. And yeah, there's just a lot here when it comes to different kinds of thoughts on what kind of partner you need and deserve versus one that, you know, it didn't feel like betrayal, but it did feel like they just left what you both invested on the table. And for you, group number 3, that still is something you're having to address. But for the rest of your life, it feels good being this villain. I think you like this role. You're like, I'm good here, you know? So, group number 3, if you resonate with any or part of this channeled message, would you consider giving me a thumbs up? It's a simple way to help me grow this brand new channel. And if you like the way that I channel messages and want to stay connected, please subscribe and click the bell so that you get notified when I upload new channeled messages. And group number 3 of This Is Where We Part, thank you for allowing me in your story. Thank you for sharing that. You most definitely are the villain that's been okay with being a villain. You're like, that's all fine and good. All right, my honeys. Hello, group number 4. This is Kamara with the Black Dove Oracle, and welcome to your villain era, a master of disguise. So, group number 4, groups 1, 2, and 3. Wow. And you know what I understand about this particular channeled message is that it is going to bring up things from the past. And so we do a little bit of an energy check about you then versus you now in your villain era. And so that's a little bit of an opportunity to do a vibe check for each one of these groups to see if any or some things resonate. Please remember these are collective channeled messages, so they're not all 100% going to fit, but there may be something in there that you find that you resonate with, group number 4. So, group number 4, we're going to do the you then versus now. And then we're going to do what was the catalyst of this change. And then we're going to just have 3 like really poignant questions about, what is it meant to have to like commit to your authentic self. So we will go through all of that, but let's get started on the you then versus you now. So you then, group number 4, I think that there was always a sense that you were this little cute innocent. You like to play on the cute and the innocent in the past. You may have even kind of played that up a little bit, like, oh, what was me? I don't really know much. I think you had to downplay any kind of strength that you had, any power that you had. You didn't really seek to explore it. You preferred to follow than lead. For you, it was not safe to really speak out about the things that you desire, the things that you wanted, group number 4. I think that you always thought it was probably a little bit arrogant to demand or take care of your needs. You weren't really willing to um, advocate for yourself, I'm hearing. You also may have indulged in a little bit of gossip now and then, back in the past. You're just like, you didn't mind forwarding or telling stories about others if it meant that you get to keep up the facade of being innocent and pure. So, what is it like now that you're in your villain era, in your era of authenticity? I think you had to now help people understand that things like gossip, things about wanting to maintain some kind of self image, those things can be really addictive. They can control your life. And so now you're one of those people that's like, no, I'm not going to be controlled by those narratives. Group number 4, you also confront empowerment at the physical level. Like you encourage yourself and people around you to be humble, compassionate, self aware. But at the same time, I feel like for you, group number 4, in your villain era, you're quite willing to do what it takes to be more independent. That's what I'm hearing. Yeah. Now, instead of relying just on the way others are perceiving you, you're actually showing up as yourself. You are more into meeting people. You're interested in getting to know people. It's not just because you have an angle in mind or a goal in mind. Like you really, when you meet people, you actually like them and you want to get to know them better. And there's no agenda there. And that feels good to you. Group number 4. I think the last thing is that you are most definitely, instead of following, you're now leading. That's interesting. Like you are no longer just going to be the assistant, the sidekick. That you have figured out how to be comfortable with leadership and know that you can also lead from a benevolent way. So you can benefit the people who are, in charge. I think some of you just recently got into management at your job. That's what Spirit is saying. And maybe you were kind of like voluntold to do this, and you're like, I don't want to do this. This is not my jam. But then you're actually turning out to really love the experience. You find that you have a lot to offer people in terms of guidance and knowledge. And group number 4, you're like, this is brand new. I think there are people who consider you a villain who you may have just been colleagues before, like peers. But now I get a sense that some of you have a real elevated position and with more responsibilities. You're also managing people. And there are a few people that you now have to manage that consider you a villain because you're no longer kind of in the trenches with them. You are a leader and you've got to do things that are oriented towards leadership. It's very interesting. So, what was the catalyst? That might have been the catalyst getting that new job. I think the catalyst too, Spirit is saying here, group number 4, is that you had to trust in parts of yourself that you don't know yet. Becoming a leader meant that you had to tap into some talents that you really didn't know. Before, when you're a follower, it's so easy to put all the responsibilities into the hands of someone else. But when you are the leader, you're starting to understand, group number 4, that there are many unknowns, but it's important to be yourself. It's important to present as someone, not to make a lot of promises you can't keep, but to present as someone who's genuinely interested in leading people, guiding them. Yeah, group number 4, Spirit is saying that the catalyst in many ways was you getting over the false belief that you have nothing to offer as a leader and really tapping into what you bring to the table. Wow. So, what aspects of your authentic self have been suppressed in order to maintain harmony in some of these toxic relationships? I really get that this is like a work oriented group number 4. There's something about you moving up and advancing at work, but there was toxic relationships that really wanted to keep you where you were. Yeah, I think there's a way in which you're having some difficulty with a segment of people you need to manage because they refuse to respect you as a leader. They want to keep referencing to things that, you all used to do together, at work to kind of pass the time and have fun. And you're no longer there, group number 4. You're just like, none of that really benefited me. I really had to learn how to mature. And maybe people are just taking that as a slight, they're like, you think you're too good now, or you just think you're the same now as everyone else in management. But I'm kind of getting that you're just moving quickly through the ranks because you're proving yourself, group number 4. You're like, your success is becoming very clear that you have these extraordinary skills, and your company, your organization wants to put them to rest. I mean, not to rest, to use. It's kind of interesting, though. You had the Hanged One in reverse. And I think there's a time where you might have just waited because you weren't sure how other people were going to react to you applying for a management position. And so maybe you let some opportunities in the past, you know, pass you up. And now you're like, nope, I think I am very clear on the trajectory of career I want. And these people are not going to give me, why would I wait for their permission to apply for these jobs? There's something there where you kind of had a realization like, no, I don't have to do that. And which kind of leads to, how do you balance the need for self-preservation with the desire to maintain connections that are often toxic, that are often draining? I think what you found, group number 4, was that you had to balance your masculine and feminine energy. You had to really give honor to how those things live in your body. You're not just here to be the cute little demure little girl, like, to be a leader, you have to step into some of that masculine energy and take control in the sense of like the direction and the intentions that you're setting. Yeah. You've started to understand, group number 4, that temperance balance is very important in your life, and that, not everyone is going to remain a student forever or a coordinator or assistant forever. And you knew you weren't going to do that either. You have your own plans, your own goals in life. And I think a lot of part of this villain era for you, group number 4, has just been simply maturing, growing up, having goals. And having goals, you actually love this life. You love that you can kind of predict when you have a goal, whether whether you're succeeding at it or not. And so I think you've been done with the vagueness of underplaying your talents and skills. And you're seeing that it's quite natural to want to utilize your intelligence. Yeah, for many of you, you're teaching people around you how to move forward, group number 4, how to transition into a life that suits you better, Instead of being the victim, you're the creator of your own destiny. That sounds better to you, group number 4. So, what fears or societal judgments arise when you think about being a villain? For prioritizing your well being, for honoring your growth? What fears come up? I think the fear comes up that maybe you'll change so much that you just don't connect with anyone at all. I think that's in partial truth that might have come true with some of your friends. But group number 4, I think if you ask that question again and see who's out there supporting you, colleagues, students, if you are teaching, who's out there supporting you in an office, like who's there? And you're going to see that change, it was necessary. It is necessary, group number 4, so that you can realize a new life. It's not always going to be comfortable. I think that's what you're learning too. It's not going to always be comfortable, but you don't have to juggle how you're living this life. And the 8 of Wands keeps coming up. Like you're taking action, group number 4, with who you want to be and how you want to live this life. And you're not letting anyone stop you. You were quite literally disguised when you were in an energy of just having to prove how docile you were, how ready to take commands you were. And now you've stepped into a place where, I don't know, your partner says, I hear a little channel message, they know what they want now. They go after what they want now. I'm not intimidated, but they go after what they want now. So group number 4, you are the one who's exercising your destiny quite well. You understand that without creating a map for yourself, without really having a plan and intention, just how you can end up spending years after years in the same place with very little progress. So, group number 4, if you resonated with any or part of this message, could you please give me a thumbs up? It's a way of helping me grow this brand new channel. And if you like the way that I channel messages and want to stay connected, please consider subscribing. You just click that bell and then click to get notified when I upload new readings. Group 4, if this is where we part, wow. There's just something powerful about your journey. And thank you for allowing us to share it. Okay, my honeys, take care.